Grace and peace to you all. Thank you so much for tuning in on another episode of the TBT Show. I'm Anthony Moten. My partner in crime, as always, is Sean P. Aguilar. I'm excited about today's show. We have a special guest in the house with us, my friend and brother, my mentor and model preacher. And Sean, he's arguably Houston's best kept secret. He's a pastor and a husband and a father, a founder of the Household of Faith Community Church. I want us to introduce to us today the Reverend Dr. Kenneth Campbell of the Household of Faith. Ken, good to have you.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me. Man,
excited to have you today. So just kind of, those that aren't familiar with who you are, just kind of catch us up. Who you are and what you have going on before we jump into the conversation.
I'm just an old Baptist preacher, man. Church boy. I've been preaching now about 32 years and pastoring about 28. And very civic minded, love to help the people. I'm an ombudsman. Yeah. Use the old English word. I defend the people. So just pressing my way, trying to navigate through these changing times. We're in a little transition in our church, but still pushing ministry forward and doing, feeding and things like that. That's major to us. And of course, nothing tops preaching the word of God.
Absolutely.
So, amen.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's actually one of the reasons that we sought to have Dr. Campbell with us today. Great preaching mind. For me, coming up as a boy preacher, after getting the call to preach, I was confused. What do I do? What does it look like? What, knew I couldn't be like the preachers around me, like what I'd seen. And so for whatever reason, God...
You settled for something like that. Well, I tell you should have said how your goals were. He said, I can do that, though. I got you.
Absolutely not.
Any way I can bless you, God.
God kind of led me to Dr. Campbell. I used to watch him, man, it was unheard of. At the time, he was at a church in Third Ward. I would go and sit in the balcony and hear him preach. Just commanding voice, a good handle of scripture, how to expose it. And I just watched it in awe. And that's, he was my model preacher. And then even got a chance in the last, few years or so to work closely with him, watching him preach every Sunday. And watch him mount the pulpit and say, Pastor, what you got today? I have nothing. And then he would mount the pulpit with, right, in his estimations, nothing. And just, God
is so kind. That's all I'm saying.
Just phenomenal preaching voice. And so, one of I've been watching preaching in our culture the last couple months, and just it's disheartening. Mm-hmm. And so, and I keep saying, the definition of preaching is changing. And I know, for, Pastor Campbell's a, concentrated preacher that, and so, knowing his preaching vein and then listening to what we, categorize preaching to be, especially in this generation, I kept saying to myself, like, okay, no wonder our culture looks the way it does. Because if preaching has life-altering power, mm-hmm, like this new age preaching, like what does it do to the life that submits to it? And so, no wonder then our culture looks the way it does. And so, I just, I feel like I know your heart, but, your mind is, Dr. Campbell should have smoke coming out of his ears the way his mind works. So just, kind of help us kind of think around it. And again, this is the reason we did the show, truth be told, because I think a lot of times we just, as a church society, we just don't address things that, if we can't tell the truth about it, we just don't address it at all. Mm. And so, one of the, true things, and especially in this generation, is preaching is different. And so what effect does that have on a culture that submits to feeble preaching?
Well, it has a tremendous effect. I heard my pastor, Dr. Ralph West, say once, preaching has fallen on hard times. And for me, the antidote to that kind of preaching, or what we would call popcorn or garbage preaching, and since truth be told,
Right.
I've always just tried to, number one, take the calling serious.
Right.
And to me, preaching is weighty. It's serious business. It's the Lord's work. And I shared this with one of my associates one time, is what I do is I try to preach in such a way that I wish someone preached to me when I was coming up and going through. So I don't try to preach to champion enough to get you through the week. We say that often. I try to preach enough to get you through life.
Right.
Yeah.
The principles I share are eternal. And so I preach with an eternal basis, not a temporary basis for some quick fix or relationship and how to get a man, how to get a woman, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can get that on the streets.
Right.
You ought to learn that already in your home. But I'm a Bible preacher, so there's not a big value on that. Sadly, in churches, people want how to do's and self-help kind of things, but no other help I know. So I have to preach the Bible and exalt Christ. So yeah, I see a lot to be desired, and I don't get it right every time myself, but at least the effort is there. And that's what I really would like to see. People have their eyes open to make a greater effort to really preach, the old cross of Christ.
Right.
The blood still works, man. Yeah.
Right.
That's my position on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I don't say that to criticize anybody. Everybody's trying to find their way, and not everybody has the role models and things that you were just mentioning like you had. I don't know how I made the list, but, I grew up listening to one thing I said about my pastor. He did expose me to preachers. I heard A. Lewis Patterson, R.A. Williams, Manuel Scott, and I read their works, listened to their sermons, and Frederick Sampson, Mac Carter, all of these guys, Gardner Taylor, are just legends, And so what we hear now is people are making role models out of people who aren't as committed to the craft, I would say, or have found tricks to the trade that they use to get around the substance.
Right.
I mean, if you listen to people on the social media, all they show is the hoop.
Yeah.
The close.
Last 5 minutes.
And that's some great closers, but then there's a lot, and I love it, so don't let me sound like I don't like it. I got a little baby hoop myself, but I always was taught, get the scoop before the hoop.
There you go.
Give me some substance with, to go with the sound.
Right. I think a couple years ago, Urban Alternative, I asked Tony Evans about the clothes. He's like, man, I love the clothes.
Right.
He's like, but when's the last time you ate a bowl of gravy?
Right.
Yeah.
Gravy's good as long as it covers some meat.
Yeah.
Right.
You know that.
Right.
That's that.
Right.
And and again, I guess this generation, and being so close to you, it helped because this generation, more is caught than taught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll ask any preacher, like, who are you listening to?
Right.
Because a lot of times you are what you eat. Like whoever you listen to the most,
right?
That
you're gonna sound the closest to that.
And then it just is what it is, and so we don't submit to good solid preaching, and and I know you're saying you ain't picking on nobody, but I've heard some stuff over the course of the last couple months.
Oh yeah.
Especially the last 2 or 3 weeks, that I'm just like.
Well, what I noticed is some of the popular preachers it's like a song and dance. So you got to entertain me every week. So that means whatever you did last week, you got to top it next week.
Yeah.
There's a story I used to hear. Anthony Campbell used to be the rector at Boston University, followed Martin Luther King. He told a story once about him going to a revival preaching. And the first night he had on his little cheap seersucker suit and got happy and moved his arm a certain way and the sleeve tore. He moved the other arm and the sleeve tore. So in ecstasy, he just pulled off the sleeves and threw them out into the audience, and the crowd went crazy, right? So he said he got there the next night and he was preaching, doing his good preaching, you know. Nobody was moving. So when he got through, he sat down and he asked the pastor, man, what's wrong, man? Nobody ain't getting with me. They tired. He said, man, they waiting on you to do what you famous for. He said, not in my good suit.
Right.
And so people look for you to do some kind of, you know, circus show every week. And then there's some guys who I think are very brilliant. They're smart, very intelligent, even theological somewhat. But they push the envelope.
Right.
And they stretch, you know, they push it to the edge.
Can they
sometimes
push it?
go over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are some who can really recover and do, and I don't want to name names, but some do it well, and others who mimic them
much.
When they try it, they fail.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
And I know you don't want to name names, but I will because it came up before. Mike Todd, Oklahoma guy, and you know I got some friends in Oklahoma from school kind of area, so I kind of watched them grow. A couple months ago, he was doing the passage where Jesus heals the blind man. He's spit on the man's eyes, and he actually spit.
Yeah, I heard about
it. And I said immediately before I even knew who it was, I assumed it was him because he's always pushing the envelope. Like,
right.
and again, like me seeing you spit does not expose this passage of scripture any more than you just using words. And I think sometimes when we're not good at painting a picture of the passage with words,
right,
then we do other stuff to try to.
And there's nothing wrong with an object illustration, but you can't let any theatrics exceed your theology. To the point where that takes away from your argument that you're trying to put forth. I know earlier you said that the definition of preaching is changing. I would just submit the definition of preaching hasn't changed. It's the demonstration of preaching that's been changing as time rolls on.
Definition of preaching. I mean, I have my own, but I'm interested to know what you all are referring to.
My favorite, and I think it was Brooks. Preaching is God's truth through human personality. And so that, but again, and when I say, the definition changes, if what I do on Sunday morning can be categorized as preaching, then some of the stuff I see, either it cannot be categorized as preaching or what I'm doing can't be categorized, but both of them can't be preaching.
At the same time, right?
I remember telling my friend Terry Brown after hearing some great preacher preach, I don't know who it was, Pat or somebody, and we conclude, I say, man, if that's preaching, what the hell am I doing? So, I don't know. These days, I'm more into spiritual discipline, spiritual formation.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, a part of my degree was in spiritual discipline, spiritual formation. So I'm working on a piece about preaching as spiritual formation. Because, like Peterson writes, Working the Angles of Preaching. You need to read that if you haven't.
Right.
And he talks about first charge of the preacher is to take heed to himself, and then you take the scriptures and then you direct the people. Yeah. But so it first starts with yourself. So my definition of preaching, and y'all don't share this too soon because this is in a piece I'm putting together. Act like you first read it when you see it.
Hey, it's just between us.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Don't take this around the country. But preaching, as I define it, is short talks with men after long talks with God.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. You can't. So the problem with a lot of preachers, we're preaching what we want to say or what the people want to hear, instead of spending the time with God to discern and discover what he wants us to say. Because he's the preacher. Jesus is the euangelion and the euangelizomai. He's the preacher as well as what is being preached about. Mm-hmm. So Pat used to say he prayed that God would say a word about himself.
Yeah.
To his people.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so preaching, if it's going to be effective, it has to come from God, which is why even if you're not hearing him audibly, you can hear him written in the scriptures.
Right. That brings me to enter this this question. Whenever Pastor Moten first introduced me to you, I remember going upstairs into the office, and seeing this vast library, you know, and you can tell that I could tell that the person I was talking to actually read those books.
Yeah.
So how do we reach an anti-intellectual audience as we pursue intellectual preaching? Not that we're giving lectures, right? But serious students of the scriptures that are the presenters and proclaimers of the gospel. How do we move that scholarship towards mindsets that are anti-intellectual?
That's interesting. I've always heard the question the opposite. How do you speak to the intellectual who thinks he doesn't need this little Bible stuff?
Right.
That's a good question. Now, as far as the books in my study, that's because I need all the help I can get. Bill Shaw was preaching somewhere, and he said the man asked him, "Did you want some water?" He said, "Yeah, I need all the help. Give me anything, you know." But to answer your question, I would say, don't dumb it down. You know, you can preach depth simply.
Wow.
If you know what I mean.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can say something very deep in a way that can be grasped or understood by the student who is untrained or unlearned. Remember, it was some unlearned and untrained men who turned the world upside down because they had been with Jesus. So I would say preach it, but don't get up trying to be impressive.
Right.
Structure your message in a way that will be effective and understood. I pray 3 things. I learned this from Dr. Patterson. Before I preach every sermon, if you ever heard me preach, I'll say, Lord, give me substance. That is something to say. Give me strength or courage to say it with boldness out of Ephesians 6. And then I pray for simplicity. Let me speak in a way, in more than contest, I pray this every sermon. I really mean this. Let me speak in a way where I might make known the mysteries concerning your gospel. That's Ephesians 6 and 20, 21, something like that. And so there's a way. Mama used to feed us greens when we were babies. But you know what they would do? They would chew it and break it down. So break it down, make it digestible, but do not deter from it or fall in the trap of not sharing what you think is deep or intellectual, because people are intellectual and you don't know it. They may not have had a great education. But it's like the old preacher who come back from seminary, the young boy who was a little hot shot, come back to his home church, quoting the Greek and all that, talking about well, God said, I'll never leave you. He's preaching. He said, you know, it's in the perfect present tense. It's a habitual and repeated action. God is really saying, I'll never, never, never leave you. And so after church, he was impressed with his little sermon, and the old mother was walking out the door. He shook her hand and said, Mother bless you. She said, thank you for the message. He said, oh, did you understand what I was saying? She said, yeah, I got it. He said, did you get when I was talking about the Greek and how God will never, never, never? She said, oh, well, he may have to say it 3 times for you Greek fellas, but once is enough for me. So I love it. You'll be surprised. It's people in that pew. They may break, split their verbs or whatever, but they know God. Yeah, that's the difference. And at the end of the day, do you want a smart congregation versus a saved congregation who happens to be smart about the gospel or the things of God?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That passion. Man, anytime I'm around you, my mind is everywhere because I got a whole bunch to ask.
Well, shoot, that's why I'm here. I ain't coming back around.
You Northeast Houston through and through.
Dirty.
We grew up, I was blessed, we grew up one street over from each other. So, I know you're at Lakewood, and, my parents moved from Fifth Ward to City Gas to Lakewood.
Same here.
And that, so, and I know we had
stopped by Glenwood Forest too, though. Yeah.
Oh, well, that, Glenwood Forest is uppity. We was
moving up. We were George and
Weezy. Yeah, so where do you see the church in this, Northeast Houston is dry food desert, considered a food desert. And yeah, we're undereducated and underemployed and, whatever. Where do you see the church filling in those gaps in, in our, community responsibility, our civic responsibility?
I will say that there are a lot of several individual churches who are really trying to do some things in the community. They're partnering with civic leaders and councilmen and all that. And but I will also add that there's not enough of a joint effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to take more than a few churches doing their own thing to really make a dent and a change. What you're talking about is real community revitalization. And you're not talking about one project, build an apartment complex, being a citizen. We're talking about a whole comprehensive plan that needs to be developed with all the super neighborhoods and all the civic clubs and the churches. And we've tried, and I've tried on several occasions to pull that off, but it's a difficult thing because people need to know how to participate when they're just an Indian and not the chief.
Mm-hmm.
Because the overall goal is the good of the community. Right. And so we're part of a project. I'm really have taken a little back seat, but I'll still count myself a part of this project where we were trying to revitalize that old Kmart on Homestead. Guy who owns it, Al Kashani, friend of the mayor, and the mayor and his team have come out, kind of took a step back once we got our city council position filled, the drama with that court and all that delayed. And so the city council woman sort of wanted to get a grip on it and everything, and kind of took a step back by taking it, this is my opinion, by the way, taking it back to the community to get approval for something we had already made progress and headway. I think we were ready to start talking about funding and actually land transfers and all that, because if behind there's the desolate area that leads all the way up to Tidwell Park, it's about 40 acres. And so we're talking about a master plan of some single-family homes and some multi-purpose homes, and connecting it with a water park and all that. I mean, I was in on drawing all the, in fact, I personally one-on-one met with the graphics designer, the architect or whatever you call it, and he sketched out the plan and drew it based on what I shared with him. So those kind of things, we will meet with a company. There's a company out of Detroit that does urban grocery stores, and they've been successful in California, Compton, and other areas, and many of them are minority owned. And so we had a plan to try to do 3, one in the Northeast area at the Kmart site, one in Acres Home, and then maybe one like in the Harlem-Clark area, just to get some momentum. And then this thing could really pick up and take off nationally, just because, truth be told, there are chains that refuse to come to that area.
Absolutely.
We lobbied HEB. They wouldn't even give us a Joe V's. So they made excuses about safety, theft, security, their loss from robberies and theft and all that. And the partnership even agreed to pay whatever their loss was for 12 months, and they still wouldn't do it. So, at some point you got to take care of yourself, but you can't do it divided. And so that's the real challenge. A leader needs to rise up, and I tried to do it not because I was the one who was able to do it, but I had a little influence because I'm from that neighborhood. But working with pastors and other groups, it's kind of difficult because everybody want to sit in the big chair. You know? And some of that's understood, but it also means you to be a good leader, you got to learn to be a good follower. Sometimes you just got to be a teammate, even if you're not the star. I mean, Harden not the star in Philly. He was here in Houston, but in Philly he's not.
But he playing like he not. So,
but I haven't given up on the effort. It's just I'm in a transition, so I'm in a regrouping phase, and I kind of backed away from the politics of it for a minute.
Oh, speaking of politics.
No, I'm not a Trumper.
No. How as pastors, preachers, how do we reconcile the Bible and the ballot? How do you lead congregational decisions about civic duty?
Well, for me, it's twofold. I have a filter, It's a biblical filter, Christian filter, and then I have a cultural filter. So what the Word of God says, and then I view it in light of how it helps and addresses my community. I mean, I'm not another race. I don't live in another area.
Right.
So I have to deal with my Jerusalem. And my Jerusalem happens to be African-American, brown people, minorities. And so it's a no-brainer for me. I mean, how does whatever this person stands for or whatever the item of discussion is affect me as a believer and then in my culture? So I'm Christocentric, then Afrocentric.
Gotcha.
In that order.
Gotcha.
And sometimes they collide and I have to find some sort of synergy.
Yeah.
Get them to play together. Somebody got to ride in the back, but we're going to get there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of, theoretically how I approach it. And so sometimes I'll be very vocal on something that's culture-centered. And then sometimes people will question your Christian morality or whatever. But I don't let, truth be told, I don't let the other culture or anybody placate me on a moral issue when this whole country is immoral.
Right.
So don't tell me that I don't think they should, if I say I don't think they should mess with Roe v. Wade. And somebody say, well, you believe in letting babies die? No, but I believe in free will.
Right.
And so I didn't believe in letting her get pregnant. So why should I try to tell her how to conduct herself? It's a woman's body. Anytime the government has a right to tell you what to do with your own body, you're in big trouble.
Right.
And so I feel like it's a white racist movement. You opened the door for this. It's a
Take the hinges off. Walk on through.
It's a quest for the white man to remain in power.
Right.
That's why they're stopping voting, messing with voters' rights, messing with the ability to vote, changing polling times and locations and how you vote ballot, because the goal is to be in control, to remain in control when other people are growing and becoming aware of the fact that they too should have a seat at the table.
Right.
But the white man and the white woman plays a part in backing him, is really trying his best to maintain the level of power and authority that they've had all along. So when you talk about rolling back, no, they're not going to lynch us, but they're doing it in other ways.
Right.
They're not going to hang us in public.
But
they have a system. I call the whole Constitution and all that a safety net for white men. Yeah. For you to vote as an African American, an amendment has to be reaffirmed like every 50 years. Isn't that something?
Right.
Because you were never included in the original Constitution. Now you're on my soapbox now.
Right. Oh no.
Hey, I mean, that's why I asked the question. I mean, I think it's because I think that some pastors, preachers, they struggle.
They preach around it.
Right. They preach around it, and they're, because I don't think anybody's advocating from the pulpit to tell the pews how to vote, but more how to think.
Wait. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
You just said that there are some unintellectual congregations.
Right.
So if they don't know, who's going to tell them?
Right.
No. I get that. I mean, the anti-intellectual question was really more around.
I know,
young
but
adults.
I'm still connecting it because if I have a I'm also tapping into the roots. Remember, our history is that the black preacher was one of the only ones who could read.
Right.
In many times, and he would pastor in 4 or 5 different cities. So you may not see him but once a month, because there was when they had church once a month, or first and second Sundays, that kind of thing. And so the pastor had to fill a lot of territory and answer a lot of questions, even on issues about voting, about life, about who to support. And so while I'm not direct and say vote for him,
right,
I am open to speak on issues and tell them what my position is, or even who I'm voting for.
And truth be told, our culture doesn't want to say from the pulpit, vote for him.
Right.
But other cultures,
others will
saying, God is a Republican.
Right. Right.
That, you know, and that
Right.
I've heard a series of sermons
Right.
from a very popular preacher.
Prominent. Yep.
God is a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Who preached that?
Ed Young.
Ed Young.
Just say it.
Oh.
Ed Young. Yeah, Ed Young.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
I was in
submit
an
to it.
intimate setting with him, and he talked about how Trump was better than Hillary. And I just, wasn't my platform to rebuke him or anything. I just shook my head, man. What a warped and twisted version of Christianity I think that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
So Hillary is evil because of emails, but Trump is good because of what?
Right.
And basically, they say things
Where to
like,
grab him?
They say things like, "Well, I wouldn't do what he did," but it's like, you'll make an excuse for whatever you want. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I get it, and that's it. And again, I'm, we had a discussion. I don't know. I'm sure you have. Have you met Stacey Childs? We got a. She's running for some position. I think it's position 4. School board, and so we talked about some other things, because again, our issues start with education, I believe, and so that's a lot of they criminalize our kids now.
Of course.
So now 4 or 5 year, when I was growing up, 4 or 5 year old, you get into a little fisticuffs at school, they gonna separate y'all, fuss at both of y'all, send you to class. Now parents have to go to court.
Wow.
Yeah, like you get a ticket, like it's a whole night. So those parents that don't have the financial means to defend their children in a court system,
right, automatically at a disadvantage.
At 4 or 5,
right,
is marked as so the rest of his life he's fighting to get off of. Like again, it's so
right. So in this case, what churches and pastors should do is build relationships with the schools and the families in their vicinity. And so whenever something like this occurs, put a call in or show up to the principal and say, I know these kids, I know their parents, I know their family, they're part of my church. And even if they're not, offer to work with them, and instead of writing them up, sending them to some kind of judicial system. Let the church intervene.
Right.
Because most kids just need a timeout. And
That's it.
Right.
That's it. And then
I fought my neighbor every day. Paul. Me and Paul fought every day. I mean, dog fight, choking, hitting with a brick, whatever. And then the next morning, he or I knocking on each other's door, ready to go play some catch. Shoot some balls.
Right.
Every day. One of us went in limping and bruised, like the coyote and the dog that beats him up. Whatever.
Road runner and Wile E. Coyote.
That's how we were raised.
Right. And then up until what? Hey, when's the last time you seen Paul?
A
few years ago at the church, their household. He's in the parking lot, and they would getting ready. I'm because again they're older than me, so I was behind them. And as a kid, I'm just shaking my head like they used to fight every day. And like, to see them as now, older men still helping and that kind of, we'll get through it. Teeth and tongue fall out, but they come back together again.
Right.
But, when you mark these kids, they just, and again, my thing is the church should be the ombudsman, the voice for the voiceless. But most of us don't have that credibility.
I think one of the things, one of the more sad things about church, and I love the church, I'm a champion of the church, so don't let this be taken out of context. I'm talking to us behind the door. We're talking to one another. Mom and them go and put you out and talk in their bedroom. Whatever. So, what I'm saying is, it's too much church that happens unintentional. That's a big word in church, intentional. Like, what's your mission?
Right.
Your mission ain't to shout every Sunday.
Right.
That's good. All that's therapeutic. It's helpful. It's a part of who we are, our culture, hooping and shouting. But I was just reading a piece out of Bill Jones' book, William Augustus Jones, God in the Ghetto. If y'all haven't read it, you need to get it. In one of the sermons, he quotes this story about a pastor who dies and goes to heaven. And it's just an allegory, so don't, look for it nowhere. But he starts reading in the books and said, man, I don't see that. He said, yeah, you should. I pastored for 30-something years. He said, no, I don't see that. And he said, well, I built 2 church buildings. Look at that. He said, oh, I don't see that. Well, I did such and he named stuff. I wrote several books and all that. He said, but I don't see it in. He said, I'm sorry, sir. So he turned him away. He was walking away, he said, hey, wait a minute. Are you the fella that fed the sparrows? He said, yeah. He said, come on in. I see your name. And so the argument was,
wow,
many of us will be exalted in God's eye for something different than what we actually pursue and think we're pleasing God with. And so getting in that intentional mode, what are we really here to do?
Right.
And getting that congregation to move in that vein is what God will say, well done about.
Right.
Not necessarily your prowess in preaching and your hoop and building a big church. All those things are good and necessary. But at the end of the day, you want to do something that you hear him say, well done.
Pastor Campbell, you must have X-ray vision on my iPad, man.
No.
X-ray vision. So the next question I wanted to ask was, how do we get believers off manifestation and in on mission? Away from gurus and towards God?
Well, I'll be honest, in our culture, you're not going to get away from the guru type because most churches are personality driven, right? And especially in our culture. And a lot of that grows out of that history I was talking about where the preacher was the man. He was the man with education, the man with courage, the man that could stand up for the people. He helped them with everything. I'm talking about from reading contracts and, praying for the children, for putting food on their table, all of that. And so, in our culture, I even wrote this in my dissertation, it's just as easy for somebody to say, I go to Moten's church. They ain't even named the church.
But we all understand.
That's how connected the congregation is to their preacher. So, but to get them from a point where it's just all about the preacher and not about the reason why we gather, it's just going to be a challenge on the pastor as first and the congregation as well to say, we don't want to just be an ordinary ministry. We don't want to just be a gathering of do-gooders. We want to make some impact in our world.
Yes.
It can be as simple as adopting a school and making sure they have backpacks and pens. I always said things like, how difficult would it be to have an after-school program where you got teachers or retired elderly women who love teaching could meet you at the church at 3:00 and have a little hot meal or some snacks for them to hold them till the parents get off and go over their homework with them, teach them some skill that they're struggling with, just tutor, help them. And that's the kind of thing that I really, really want to get back to. Yeah.
And that's important, especially where, where we are, because we don't know what kind of environment these kids are living in.
And then you also become a bridge builder to help the educators who are doing it full time at the schools. If you can work on taking away the discipline issues, teaching them how to be right, how to live right and in community and not be bullied or a bully, and not being a problem. Because a lot of kids act out because they're not getting attention at home. And that's just an example of what I mean. And there are multiple things that a church can do, but the church has to establish its vision, its mission, and know its purpose and really pursue it to the point where you don't get sidetracked by the annual tea.
Me to win a banquet.
No, there's nothing wrong with those things if that's a part of your culture and you're ministering to a group, especially seniors like that, kind of dressing up, looking good. But make sure you keep the main thing the main thing. Yeah,
I get it. Yeah. I get it. And again, like, because there is that, so we talked about this once, but so that answers the question why this generation doesn't necessarily connect to church, because this generation is more of, I want to see what you're doing. I don't, Tay it was hard for him to fit in Austin. Couldn't find a church home. And of course I sent him to, I can't even think of the name of it. It's a Great Design. Mount Zion with
Greater
big
Mount
church.
Zion in Austin.
Yeah,
Greater Mount Zion.
Yeah, Clark. Where and he met great friends, friends, brothers. To this day, Courtney
Vicente
is his. They're like brothers.
Okay.
But he was like, man, I don't connect with the church because it's big clog, and I don't really see a lot of community work, and because that's what this generation wants to see.
Yeah,
and that's what we don't show a lot, and that's why the pandemic it stopped corporate worship, but the community work was on it was a lot to do, but because we couldn't have church, we just stopped doing anything. And
yeah, so I'm actually having a resurgence, like a revival among my millennials. So they've always been there, but we've never tapped into their energy. Well, we've met with them a few times, little Bible studies, group discussions, but now they are officially organized with leadership, with goals and vision, and they've been really going like the last 2 months, and they just did a thing on Saturday where they cooked up some food and put together some care packages and drove around to several seniors' house, dropped them off, prayed with them, ministered to them. Just something simple and subtle. Now they're energized. They're like, what are we going to do next? So again, that age group wants to not only see, but be a part of action.
Right.
And action more than just church. See, we pastors, we concerned about church because church is our bread and butter.
Right.
We got to get bodies in there, and we got to get electronic giving on going, and we got to shout them and present and make sure all of the lights, cameras, action is on point. We're streaming now. You got to have good mics, good vocals, good presentation, good message, because if it ain't, I'm swiping to the next.
Right.
It's a different culture. But these young people really want to do something, I would say, that's fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so I'm working with them. We're finding things to do. And now it's to a point where they're coming to me. I didn't ask them to do that. They had, can we?
Yeah.
When they start saying that,
they're bought in.
You're on the right road.
You got that momentum going in.
And it's a lot more to go. I'm not trying to jump the gun, but I'm encouraged. If I saw that kind of momentum in the other ministries, we would be well on our. And this is why we're in transition.
Wow. So
they came to me just the other week and asked me, can you plan a Sunday in the next month or so, whatever, where we lead? They want to do the praying, the scripture, the whole nine, other than preach, they want to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they're not quite ready for choir, but they ask for that down the road. They'll go to praise people. It's Millennial Sunday. And so we've done stuff like this before, but it's very encouraging to have it come from down up instead of up down.
Right. So even with stuff like that, so how open, especially with this, because there's a lot going on. You got, we on the, or on the other end of COVID, hopefully, you got, social issues and that kind of. So how creative or how open to creativity should the pastor be when it comes to where the church is in this season? Because I know most of us, this is where we are is completely outside our wheelbox. This, and so the pandemic and other things have forced us to be creative or allow some creativity. But how open should the pastor be?
I had been saying that I wasn't cut out for pastoring in these times. I really admitted it. Like, I grew up, the church was an automatic. It wasn't a afterthought or maybe. We went to church. People went to church. People gave. People ministered, served in the choir and all that. You didn't have to twist no arms and beg nobody. That just was a natural thing in my upbringing. So today, now, everything is you got to convince me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on any given day, you got a room full of, or an audience full of skeptics, either viewing you socially or sitting in a room with you. And they're like, so what?
Right,
Prove me something,
Right.
As I was saying, I'm just not cut out for it because I grew up with the assumption people love church. Church was our backbone and the struggle and all that. And so, but I've stopped saying that now. I realize some of the things that I was already doing and making opportunity for, people are calling creative. It's 2022. You still got people arguing over women preachers, pants in church. Like, that's so 70s for me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not saying everybody got to get on the bandwagon, because if you don't believe, you don't believe it.
Right.
But I'm also saying, don't let that be a trivial point that hinders you from exploring opportunities to minister and serve.
Right.
You think you big shot because you say, I don't have no women in ministry here? SW, Wiley Dunn would say, so what? What do you have?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I'm open to creativity. I mean, in the 90s, when I was a young pastor, I had youth doing the same thing the millennials asking for.
Right.
The youth read the scripture, they prayed, they did it. And sometimes I remember bringing in little Andrew Bear, he must have been about 12 or 14 years old, and letting him stand on a box and preach. Because I gave him full reign of the, even lift the offering. I didn't let him count it, though. Don't give it to the deacons, baby. Give it to the financial people. Thank you, baby. Good job.
I remember seeing a picture at household when I served at household for a couple of years. And I don't know, we must have been cleaning out a room or something. And a picture of Andrew Berry and Pastor Campbell and Dr. West. And
that was at our banquet the first several months after we organized.
Yeah.
Maybe about 8 months in, we did a banquet. It was a capital stewardship banquet, trying to get money to get going. Yeah. And I brought Andrew to speak to the youth.
Wow.
We went, I think we were in the hotel downtown. What was that name of that hotel? Anyway, they were in the ballroom with the youth. We were in the ballroom with the adults. And Pastor West spoke that night. He said something that I never forgot. He said, the time will come where you will have to live up to your name and literally become the household of faith. You will be challenged and stretched. Yes. Lord have mercy. Never a prophetic word. I wish he would have said, you will prosper and be overwhelmingly blessed. And we have been.
One of the things, and the weight is, and I wish I had talked to you more in that transition, but the weight of
I tried. You went under on me. It's all right.
I know and you just talked about it, like the connection that we have with the pastor. Mm-hmm. And I believe, and I always have, that there's a people for every pastor and a pastor for every people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so we don't live in a generation where people are connected to church as much as they are connected to pastor. Mm-hmm. Every Sunday I stand up and see, people that spent their entire lives at the church that I left. Mm-hmm. Because they felt some connection to my voice and came with me. And so sometimes the weight of that is like, okay, man, I really gotta, I gotta do my best to make this a successful situation. And I know your history is much the same. Do you ever feel the weight of like, I gotta be at my best because this church has to be at its best, because people are, not just banking on church, they're kind of banking on me.
Yeah, to a degree, you want to do your best to encourage people and to represent them well and live before them well. But at the same time, there's a word of caution. Mm. So one of the reasons why I believe our church stalled for a season is because I was so honored to have these people follow me. Mm. So I was so grateful that people had been at this church where I left their entire life. 40 and 50 years. Elderly people been there for years, raised their families there, but believed in me enough to take this journey with me, to step away from their so-called roots. And so in a lot of instances, I gave a lot of people a lot of passes on how they lived and served, simply because I was so grateful that they came with me. And then I'm at a point now where I'm really about to be a good pastor. Trial and error, you know, ups and downs. I'm finna.
Yeah, right.
I'm finna be the best pastor you've ever seen. Because now I'm at a point where T.R. Williams said this years ago, and I never had the discipline to implement it. When he built his building, he says, New Faith, he says, I did it intentionally, separated the administrative office from the sanctuary. Because in the sanctuary, I'm the pastor. But in the administration building, I'm the boss. And I never get the two crossed.
Wow.
There's love and forgiveness and grace and all that. But over here, you can't type. my friend Gerald Duke, bless his heart, in Chicago, we're going to be giving some money to his church. The church burned down. Check that out, Antioch Baptist Church of Chicago. He used to say that he had a secretary that typed 10 words a minute, but made 11 errors. Yeah, TR used to say, you can't look at the bulletin and say, per Psalms. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, over there, it's cut and dry.
Right.
Do the work, you're an employee, we work, we serve, we minister. And so I've always muddied the two. I've always given grace when performance wasn't up to par, and I was just so happy that they came. And so it affects you, because if you're not pushing for excellence, if you don't have that intentionality all the way across the board, you're going to suffer. And I mean, it took me all this time to be able to say, now, I've loved you long enough for you to know that if I'm coming down on you, it's serious. It's about business now. We family and we love each other, and we going to be all right. But on this end, I can't let you slide no more, you know?
Right.
I hope that kind of... I got all these stories and the scars and war stories.
waiting for that book. That book we talked about.
Yeah.
I ain't ready yet. I'm getting closer now. Getting my stories together.
I don't want. One of the things I wanted to close with today, and this, because nobody knows a lot of details, but it was just odd to me. So last night, David Chappelle's doing a show in L.A. He's getting ready to close out his show.
I heard about that.
Dude jumps on stage and, attacks him. And at the point of the show, David's Chappelle's bringing up all the OGs of the game that he calls, whatever. So the crowd can salute, guys that lay down the path for him, whatever, that he had respect for. And that's when this happens. And I'm like, looking at what happened with the Will Smith thing, and then I'm like, the comedic stage was sacred, much like the pastor's pulpit. So, and I'm looking at it, and I know everybody sees something different. I'm looking at it going like, man, nothing is sacred anymore. Like, so, and I'm not worried about nobody running up on me on no Sunday morning. I ain't worried about nobody running up on me on a Sunday morning. I'm like, what's got bad news gonna beat you home? But it's just, we've lost and I don't want to call the comedic stage sacred, but in a way, in a sense. So, but we've lost the admiration for certain things that we used to, the generations before did. And I'm looking at that like, man, like just where do you see this generation, this culture where like things that we used to consider, we can honor those things. And if not all the time, at least in the moment. Like now it's just like everything is commonplace, everyone is commonplace. There's no there's no lines of respect anymore.
Yeah. Well, we've gone from Moses, take your shoes off. The ground you're standing on is holy ground.
Mm-hmm.
To, from a sanctuary, a church, to a worship center,
Mm-hmm.
to an auditorium,
Mm-hmm.
to tennis shoes and shorts and all that kind of stuff. And, I grew up in church where I remember we were singing in the choir. We had visited Old Man Brown Church over on Langley.
Mm-hmm.
And Phyllis, was a choir director, very animated, move around. And they didn't have a separate stage for her, so she was on the platform with the pulpit, but, on the side. But as she began to move and direct, I never forget Old Man Brown leaned over and put his arm out and held it there the whole time the choir sang. As if to have a border for her. Don't cross here.
Wow.
And we were looking like, he tripping.
Yeah.
That pulpit was sacred to him. I also remember another story Pastor West told when little Ralph was a young boy. He was leaning on a communion table, something like this, and a lady went over and tapped and said, "Get off of that table. Don't lean on that table like that." He went over and told his dad, "Dad, that lady hit me for leaning on that." He said, "What table?" He said, "Down right there." So Ralph hit it. And just that little subtle lesson was taught to him, And then we just got, I would say that we live in a post-Christian world.
Mm-hmm.
If you're still saying postmodern, you way behind.
Right.
We'll post everything.
Right.
And so there's no sense of value anymore because people aren't churched. Like we grew up in church. I went to church dang near 7 days a week, all day Sunday. Monday was brotherhood. Tuesday was mission. Wednesday, Bible study. Thursday, choir rehearsal. Friday and Saturday, we had some musical somewhere, youth activity on Saturday, and get ready to start all. I'm a church brat. So to me, looking at people who does not have a relationship with God, don't know that, I feel like they've been cheating. That's really my burden for the youth. I feel like we're cheating going on a second generation from the foundation about God and church that many of us got. And so it's like, how do you fix that? How do you rectify that? You got to have strong youth and children ministries, and you got to be creative. You mentioned that word earlier, because now everything they learn is visual.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to get some people who are putting these lessons into graphics and games and all kind of stuff to learn. I never understood when y'all were young then, but when I was working in the corporate world and Windows and all that first came out and click and drag and double click and all that, these were things we didn't know nothing about. So they have the solitaire game. I didn't know that game was actually invented to teach you the motions of click and drag and doing all that. Then when you got to your applications, you were able to do it. And so there was never an argument about playing the games. In fact, they came installed on the work computers.
Yeah.
And so some kind of way we got to figure out how to create things and use our wisdom, because the message is always the same. It never changes. The gospel is Jesus Christ and him crucified and resurrected. But how do you translate that into this modern world? And you gave the word creativity. Be creative, get outside the box, accept the fact that many are not going to learn it the way we did. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so are you open enough to say, I'm going to reduplicate Pentecost, because that's what I call it. See, most people shout and argue over Pentecost because of tongues, when the tongues were not even the major miracle that happened on that day. The major miracle of Pentecost was every man heard in his own voice, his own language. So if they rap, beatbox, spit, text, put that message in their language, and you are declaring the gospel.
Wow.
When I pray on Sunday, sometimes I'll say, Lord, I pray for a Pentecost experience in this worship, not just in the speaking, but also in the hearing. Yep.
That's that. And we're in we're in a generation where we have to reimagine church life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We waiting for 3:00 programs and
to come back, man.
It's I haven't had one of those in years. I mean years.
Yeah.
I think last time I had one was maybe about 6 years ago. I if I remember right, I think I brought Marcus Cosby, Wheeler Avenue.
I remember. I
had Sheila Lee there. I think
was that your anniversary?
It was an anniversary.
Yeah.
And I declare, if it was 50 people, I'll eat you.
That. Yeah, it was empty in that. Yeah, I remember that.
They just don't come back. And they blessed me. They gave, and they shouted that morning, but they did not come back for that evening service.
Yeah.
But Marcus God, bless his heart, he preached like it was 5,000.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Again, I think this is just, and that's why conversations like this are good. That's why I want to have it.
Of course.
Because it gives us that concentration again back to preaching being the hub.
Mm-hmm.
I remember some years ago, I got to bring Dr. Campbell back. I remember some years ago, we had a conversation and Pastor Campbell said, this is the preaching machine.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ken Campbell says, man, preaching overrated. You remember that?
I don't, but it sounds like something I might say.
Because what we looked at was...
What was the context of it?
What we looked at was a lot of churches that were doing the other things in ministry that we wanted to do were headed by senior pastors that were not exceptional preachers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
in the context of administration.
Right.
Not just growth or development.
Like you got, ministries, whatever.
Ministry.
People, like when you see, I know for years, one of the fastest growing churches in America was Rick Warren.
Saddleback.
And nobody goes to hear Rick Warren preach. He said that he did, some questionnaires on why members joined that church.
Mm-hmm.
And at the season they did it, he did the questionnaire, they had just done oil change for the women of the church, whatever, and women had joined the church because of a free oil change. So it's not the other stuff that
mm-hmm.
and so I because I'm a preacher and I know preaching is for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like I want to hear good preaching.
Yeah,
but and I believe people are connected to that. I just don't want our church to be.
I considering that context, I can understand why I would say what I said, but I still believe preaching is the central function of the church.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look, some churches you go to, even architecturally, you can see that. I learned this in church history, like the Methodist church, sometimes the pulpit is over to the side.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lutheran used to have it up high or whatever, but you go to a good Baptist church or a Word church, that pulpit is in the center.
Mm-hmm.
It's an object lesson of what's the central part of the existence of this church. Yeah. So I don't know why I said it like that. Maybe now that you gave me the context, I can see, but I still believe men are saved by the preaching of the gospel.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this, preaching is made more effective when the other areas of ministry are employed as well. Right. As long as you got, because you can't make me believe, as much as there is fanfare behind, take Joel Osteen.
Mm-hmm.
He stepped out from behind the camera and stepped into the pulpit, and the ministry grew exponentially from that of his father, who was a preacher.
Right.
And all of that can't be just because he's suave and handsome and speaks well. That's because behind the scenes, there's a whole lot of other things going on that make that church what it is.
Right.
In fact, some of the teachers and all his brother and others are probably more theologically sound than him and deeper. And so they're running those education aspects of the church and all that. And the children's ministries, just imagine, is out of this world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And see, maybe that's the dots I'm trying to connect, because as well as we do with just, preaching and Sunday and, hitting the church switch, how much better with church and ministry being this generation if we connect those other dots.
Yeah.
You know, preaching and then other ministries that meet the whole.
Right.
And you know, that's what our drive is at this point to meet me. If you're a family, we want to have, you know, adequate couples ministry and children's ministry. And if you're, you know, adequate ministries that meet everyone where they are.
Right.
But I would also caution that you don't try to swallow the whole pie in one bite.
Mm-hmm.
You figure out what's most needed in your area, your community, and then figure out what are you most able to do or most passionate about, and begin to do that and then grow. It does have to be comprehensive. Right. You got to touch many areas, but I would rather touch one or two areas
that you're good at
very well than just hit and miss on a bunch of areas.
Right. I get it. Son, you had anything else, man? I thank you for coming.
That was a whole lot, man. That was rich.
Hey, I
appreciate you coming and joining us, Dr. Campbell.
Thank you for having me.
I enjoy this. I used to before he cut me off, I used to drive him around just to hear him talk.
Come on, man.
It make life make sense to me. I appreciate you being here. And then we got some other things, coming in days to come. Hopefully, I can set up something to get Stacy on, talk to us about, her campaign, what's going on with that, whatever. And a lot of things going on in our city, but I definitely thank you for being here.
Appreciate
Pastor Campbell, you got something special going on that you want to plug? I know you mentioned Pastor Do that, and I need to attach that information.
Yeah, if there's anyone that want to share, just contact the church. It's Antioch Baptist Church in Chicago. I think it's in a town called Inglewood or something like that. It's the outskirts of Chicago, one of the suburbs there. Yeah. But it's an old historical church, burned a few weeks ago, and they had to graze it all away immediately. So I think they're meeting in a funeral home. I'm scheduled to go there in a week or so for another conference, but I want to stop by. I was scheduled to preach there. I don't know if we're still on or not, but I'll be in town to visit them one way or another. And so just pray for that ministry, pray for that church. That's the main thing that I'm thinking about.
Absolutely. Because it was like, was it Good Friday? Or maybe
Good Friday.
It was Good Friday.
It was Good Friday. They just left for a service.
Yeah.
Some men were working on the roof, and they think that's where it started.
Yeah. And Pastor Dew used to pastor here in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Great guy, great preacher. And so, we're praying. And matter of fact, I'm going to let me know, and I'm going to send a gift to help. He definitely has our prayers. I don't think there's anything coming up in days to come. Shout out my own personal family. Shout out, congratulations! My oldest son is graduating from Memphis.
Right,
this coming weekend. With his masters, and great things are coming for him. So definitely want to give a congratulations to him. Sean, did you have anything? And nothing going on at the Good Shepherd Church.
Man, we're just getting ready for worship on this Mother's Day that's coming up, and that's about it.
Good.
But we'll put up the information.
Right.
Once everything posts as far as Antioch. Absolutely.
Well, if there's nothing else, again, thank you for joining us, and Pastor Campbell. Again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Campbell's one of Houston's best kept secrets. I'll say this. He ain't gonna say it, but a lot of the preachers that have national acclaim, sit at the feet of Pastor Campbell to learn how to preach.
Come on, man.
Am I stretching? I'm telling the truth now. Come on. See. He's a jewel.
Flattery gets you everywhere. Thanks for the compliment.
He's a jewel, and again, I want to thank him for being here. And then thank you for joining. Always grace and peace, and we look forward to having you in upcoming episodes of the TBT Show.
Truth be told, I had a good time.
There you go.
Amen.
There you
Do
go.
it again soon.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.